So Encore is one of the core topic of CCNP, the core certification or core exam, I should say, out of the two. So when we see the structure of CCNP, which has been changed, so now what happens is that you do the CCNA, and or you might not do the CCNA also, because that's entry level, although it's an entry level certification, but it's no longer like a prerequisite to make your CCNP active. But to learn something right from the scratch, let's say you did your CCNA and then you move to the professional level, and there you have to take two exams to become CCNP certified, Cisco Certified Networking Professional. So earlier it used to be three certifications: route, switch, and T-shoot. But now there are two certifications or two exams you have to do to get the certificate. One is called the core exam, technology core, and another one is called the concentration exam, where you go a little bit in more detail uh, on a particular topic. That's why it's called concentration exam. So technology core means you will learn about multiple technologies and a little bit of everything, but you don't go into much detail into a particular part of it. But in concentration exam, you take few topics, but you go into much more detail into that. So the core exam for CCNP routing and switching track, which is nowadays it is called the enterprise infrastructure. That one we call the Encore, right? So the Encore will be the one that we are going to start today. Is the routing and switching part, uh, or routing and switching track core exam. There are other core exams as well. For example, Encore can also be used for CCIE exams. I mean, it can be used as a prerequisite or the qualifying exam to book the lab exam for CCI. So earlier, what used to happen? There was a CCNP track, route, switch, and T-shoot, and then there was a dedicated CCI qual exam, CCI qualification exam, that was a written multiple choice question test, which you need to pass before you can book the CCI lab exam. So CCI qualification exam was a separate exam. So you had to spend, first of all, more money to pass three certifications for CCNP. And then if you want to go ahead with CCIE, you have to pass another exam, which was around like $450 something, which was called qual exam. But now the good thing is that if you are preparing for your CCNP and you are passing the core exam for that particular track, whether it is enterprise track, security service provider, collaboration data center, you will see that passing the CCNP core exam for that particular track also enables you to book the lab exam for that CCIE track. That means this core exam of CCNP also act or work as a qualification exam for CCIE. So you don't need to spend more money separately uh, to pass the qual exam. There is no separate exam anymore, right? The CCNP core exam allows you to be able to book the CCI. Sorry, the CCNP core exam allows you to book the CCI lab right after that. Right after that, or any time within 3 years, because that's the duration how long your core exam will be active, right? But just one thing to understand is that there are core exams for every track. Like as I said, there is Encore for enterprise. Similarly, there is a SP core for the security, and there are other names for service provider, collaboration, data center. There are different core exams. So let's say if I have passed my core exam in the security track, I can only book the CCI security lab exam. Understandably so, right? You cannot pass the security core exam and then go ahead and book the enterprise lab or collaboration lab. That doesn't happen. The only difference you will see here is that if you pass the enterprise core exam, the Encore that we are going to start from today or from the next session, you will see that this will allow you to be able to book either CCIE wireless exam or CCI routing switching, which is now called enterprise infrastructure exam. So for both these CCI tracks, the common qualification exam is technology core, right? That's why you will see that in this Encore topic, we will have a dedicated wireless session as well, although theoretical part only, but there will be some information where we understand how exactly a wireless work and some of the basics of wireless technology, right? And concentration exam. because you go a little bit more detail, so you only choose few topics and you go into detail of that. For example, you can decide to do NRC. And by the way, there are multiple options for concentration exam, and you just need to do one of them to become CCNP certified. If you already did your Encore, then you just need to do one of these, or vice versa. You do one of these and then you do Encore, like we are doing. We decided to go with NRC, which you see is the first one, implementing Cisco Enterprise Advanced Routing and Services, right? And you also have option to go into more detail of wireless, and that makes more sense. If you are going to go for CCI wireless, then you could have gone with the enterprise wireless networks, designing or implementing, you can see, or you can go with designing Cisco enterprise networks. So if you are thinking that, okay, I would also want to do my CCDE later in the future, CCDP, CCD, designing professional, designing expert, then designing certification might make more sense. If you are more interested into SD-WAN, then you can go more in depth by doing the concentration exam of implementing Cisco SD-WAN solution. Although, what is SDN, software defined networking, and then what is SDA and SD-WAN? SDA is the campus side solution of SDN, and SD-WAN, as the name suggests, is the WAN side solution. Uh, these things will also be introduced in Encore. So in Encore, we are also going to talk about this, but these will be like the theoretical topics. You will not have any lab into the exam. But if you go for the SD-WAN solution concentration exam, there might be some labs also on that level, right? Or if you are more interested into programmability, you can go with the automation and programmability Cisco Enterprise Solution concentration exam. So in this case, we had decided to go with the routing and switching because anyway, the in-depth SD-WAN and programming solution, these things we actually discuss into the CCIE level. So when you go for CCIE, we actually make sure that we understand all the things that we need to know for these two different things. All right, I see a question. For SD-WAN, do you need to know programming? So programming, the basics of programming can be very helpful for programmability and some part of SD-WAN. But the core of SD-WAN, let's say if you want to understand how SD-WAN work, you want to implement SD-WAN solution, you want to check it on every level, you don't need programming at all. But there are some options that you can do. For example, you can use APIs. So APIs means you can make remote calls to the SD-WAN SD manager, and then SD manager can actually provide you or change the information according to your request. That's something you can automate by using programming. Like you can create Python programs to send these REST API requests automatically, and then whenever the response is sent back, it can represent or it can show you that output into the XML format or JSON format. So there you can actually leverage the programming knowledge or automation knowledge to make your life easier or to make it much more convenient for you to implement SD-WAN. But it's not a requirement. SD-WAN is a standalone solution. It doesn't depend on programmability. It can be made easier by using programmability or automation basically, right? I hope this is clear. All right. So we are going to go with the core exam from next section. That means we are going to cover the topics which are mostly the basics of things like switching, what is wireless, what is software defined networking, what is programmability, and some other topics. Some things you will see are also repeated. Like we also discuss again routing protocols, like we did in NRC, but much more basic level. Basic level means not basic level as in like associate level or anything. It is still advanced, but we don't go very in depth. Like we don't spend multiple days on OSPF or multiple days on EIGRP, but we do cover some important aspect that, and that will be a good revision as well, because these topics are again asked into this exam as well, right? On the Encore level. So how exactly this program is created for that? So this is a complete program. As you know that we have done the NRC also, it covers both core and the concentration exams. And the concentration is the NRC, and the version is 1.1. So there had been few changes which we had already incorporated. And Encor also there is version 1.1 that we are covering. So there are minor changes between 1.0 and 1.1. So we make sure that we cover the latest one that we are going to use, right? So as a matter of fact, let me see uh, if I can pull out the syllabus here. All right, so this is the Encor version 1.1, the syllabus. So you will see that in this one we have the architecture, like the basics of designing part, like how exactly does the tier 2, tier 3 fabric cloud and these things work. And then you can see that we have the SD-WAN cover and SDA also cover. Although the keywords you need to pay attention here, whenever they are asking you to explain something, that means you will not see any lab on this into the exam. So you need to know the basics of these topics, because you know they already have a concentration exam for SD-WAN or SEA, so they don't want you to go in depth. But as I told you, core exam is more about learning many topics, but on the basic level, not going too much in depth. That's why you see that there is wireless QoS configuration and wireless concepts as well. Virtualization concept, what exactly it works, how does it work, and then there are some configuration part as well. So we will do VRF, GRE, and IPsec tunneling, but we'll understand some topics as well, like Lisp and VXLAN, where we don't need to configure them, but we need to know exactly what is a location ID separation protocol, or what is the virtual extensible LAN, and how do they actually are used by Cisco into which technology. For example, when you go for Cisco software-defined networking for the LAN side, for the campus side, which is called SDA, it actually uses Lisp and VXLAN for the control plane and data plane. So we'll understand how do they interact with each other, what is the difference between these two, and how they are used by the software-defined networking technology. Then of course we have our basic switching and routing. So EIGR, POSPF, VGP, policy-based routing. So that's where you will see a lot of things we have covered already in NRC, but we will of course cover them again on the level that you need for Encor. So if you already joined the NRC class, you will benefit with the for the revision. And if you are joining just like if somebody is joining just the Encor, they will get the all the information that they need for the exam, right? Same thing for wireless. We are going to understand the basics of wireless and how exactly wireless work. But again, there is a concentration exam on wireless if somebody is planning to do CCIE wireless. So that's why they only cover the basics here and how exactly the wireless concept work, and the IP services, that how different IP services work. This is something again, some of these things we have done in NRC as well. Network assurance, NetFlow, SNMP, syslog. Some of the topics like netconf and resconf, how exactly do they differ when you use it for the programmability, security, and the automation. So in automation, we are going to understand the basics of Python. How does the JSON encoded files look like? Like how do we identify that this file is structured into JSON format, JavaScript object notation, or how is it structured into XML format versus Jinja format? There is YAML. So how do we know the difference between these different coding infrastructure, or the representation, data representation infrastructure, right? What exactly is the Yang data model? This is like a language of programming. So what do we mean by this, and how do we understand this, and how can we use these things for the APIs for the SDN, software defined networking, for SDA LAN side, which is called DNS center, or WAN side, which is called the vManage. These are the basically the management plane of these LAN or WAN side solution for software defined networking. Also, we should see that when you get a response back, what exactly that response means. When you send a call and then you are getting a response of 200, that means everything is okay. You're getting 201, maybe you are not only getting everything is okay, but you're getting some text also into the response, maybe into the JSON format or some other format. So what exactly do we have, or the differences between these responses? We'll also understand something called EEM, embedded event management, which is like an internal programming language, you can call it, of Cisco devices, and how we can use it to automate some tasks. Like if something happens, the router should do something based on the response, or the switch should do something based on a particular event. So we can configure these using EEM. You can also include this into making sure that some certain aspects are always intact. Like if somebody is trying to type no router BGP on your router, trying to remove BGP, that should not happen. That command should be ignored, and a warning message should be logged, and an email should be sent to the administrator, something like this. So you can take multiple actions if an event happens. So we will see examples of those as well, and also understand the basics of agent versus agentless orchestration tools like Chef, Puppet, Ansible, and SaltStack. So these are the main topics. You can see that there are many different things that are covered into Encore, and the reason is same, because most of these you don't need to know the configuration knowledge, but you need to know the basics, that how exactly these technology work, right? So more of the labs that you see in this exam are not going to be based on like wireless or SD-WAN, but it will be more like routing, switching, security, IP services. These kind of labs will be there, right? Uh, yeah, I see a question. Are there simulation questions in the test? Yes. So both in NRC and in Encore, you might see some labs, and these labs are basically, they will give you a diagram. You can click on the devices either to check some show commands or to configure something. So these are called the simulation labs, and they are weighted also, means you will get more marks for doing the labs than for any multiple choice question. But of course, the number of simulations will be less comparing to number of multiple choice questions. So if there are like 65 to 70 questions, you might get 3 or 4 labs only, and others will be like drag and drops or multiple choice questions. So I'm also going to at the end of the course, I'll also give you idea like currently which kind of topics they are covering in simulation, because you can't predict exactly which labs you will get, but you can check that which kind of topics they are asking. Like, are there more OSPF labs or AAA labs or switching labs, which kind of sims they are asking more, so that you can make sure that those are properly revision before you go for the exam. Sure, no problem. So you'll see that in this course, there the core exam that we are going to do, Encore. So there's a typo, there's no E, Encore. Also, it works as a CCI qual exam, as I mentioned before, and one elective exam or concentration exam, which we have covered before, NRC in this course, because this is the natural progression to go for routing and switching, and or routing and switching CCI. So that's why we cover NRC. But we also have courses if you want, because we are going to introduce SD-WAN here, and then in a CCI exam also we have SD-WAN in depth, SDA also in depth. So if you want to do that concentration exam as well, then we also have a dedicated course just for 0 to SD-WAN, basically, if SD-WAN is something that you're interested in. But yes, you just need to pass one core exam and one concentration exam to become the CCNP certified. But if your goal is only to move on to CCI, then Encore alone will be enough. So it's good to have the knowledge of NRC, because knowledge is very important for CCI. But you don't need to necessarily pass the NRC exam if you are just going to go for CCI. You can just pass the Encore exam, and then you can start preparing for the CCI lab directly, because you will have 3 years after passing Encore to book at any time the lab and go for the CCI lab. There is no prerequisite for CCI. You don't need to do CCNA or become complete CCNP certified for going for the CCI, right? but many people actually decide to pass the CCNA and then both exams of CCNP and then go for CCIE, right? So both way it is completely fine. Encor is a 350-401. That's the exam code, which actually stands for Implementing and Operating Cisco Enterprise Network Core Technologies. And NRC is the Enterprise Advanced Routing and Services. That's what we had covered in the NRC course as well. And that's why there are separate OVS for both CCNP, because we actually covered different topics. Like in NRC, there was no switching questions, so we did not have any switching labs. We only had the routed labs, and there was a separate OVA. That's why I have sent you another OVA for Encor, so that we can actually cover the switching as well and some other programmability topics as well, right? Now, what is the exact course structure for 0 to CCNP? So, especially for Encor, so this one is going to be 2 times a week, as we know, and it will be 2 hours per session. So this is something you are familiar, because we have done in RT also into the similar structure. Live Zoom session with me explaining concepts and showing the lab configuration. So this will have less labs than NRC, but because some topics are completely theoretical, so some sessions you will see it will be complete theory and no lab to follow. You just need to revise the theory. But those topics which do have the labs, like if we are talking about, let's say, configuring a Python programming or EEM script, or if you are talking about spanning tree protocol and switching, it will be backed up with the lab. And if there is a lab, I'm going to solve the lab step by step within the Zoom session, and then you will do the same following in that particular week. So I'll send you the lab after that, and then you can also do the lab there as well, right? Of course, we'll make sure that whether it is a theory topic or a practical topic, in both cases, we make sure that we cover in-depth theory, and we also have multiple practical labs for the topics which you might see the simulation in the exam as well. So for SD-WAN and SDA, you don't have any labs into Encor exam, because in exam also you will not see any lab on these. They just want you to know, like same thing for wireless. They just want to make sure that you know exactly how these technologies work. And later, if you go for CCI routing switching, you will get the labs there. For SD-WAN and SDA, we have the configuration or practicals on the CCI level. So in Encor, we don't have any labs for these. Excuse me. So we will use the same structure where the lab's PDF will be sent after the session along with the solution file. So you will get the solution file as well. So if when you are doing the lab, you can always refer to the solution file, because it's again, when you are doing the lab on your own, it's not a test. We are just re-strengthening our concepts that we learned into the Zoom session. So feel free to go back and watch the video or check the solution file as many times as you want, because you're still registering the concepts and trying to understand how exactly it is configured, right? But I see a question. Can you at least show how it's configured in the class? So it's not actually something which is unlike like OSPF or BGP, where I can just show you the quick configuration. It's a complete step by step. You will see that when we go to the SD-WAN concept, it's actually multiple controllers. You need to set up licensing. You need to set up the vManager, vBond, vSmart, and then vEdges, and then you need to actually enable IPsec sessions between them so that they can start working control plane and data plane. But yeah, I think I can show you one example that how exactly it looks like once it is configured, and how does it work, like in one of the like practical example. That is something we can cover that time, no problem. And also this is the EVNG based topologies. That means whenever we are going to cover the labs, we are going to do it on EVNG. That's the OVA I have sent you. So we are going to use that. So just to explain you, let me see. So 0 to CCNP Encor. Let me start this and we'll check this out. So we are going to use the EVNG based topology, and there will be different different topologies for these, for switching and routing. So let it be restored. So we'll come back to it once it is restored. And of course, every lab session or every live Zoom session that we are doing, it will be recorded, and you will see the recording, or you will have the access to the recording for the lifetime. Although the recordings might not be from the current class, because we have had the Anchor class before as well. So the recording will be from the first class, but the topics will be same, and the important information that you need to understand for that from that topic will be exactly same. So when you are watching that recording, it will give you the same benefits as what you learn into the existing session, right? So it might not be from the current class, maybe from the previous class, but the same topic. So talking about the Encore, this exam actually tests your knowledge and skills related to multiple different technologies, as we saw the syllabus as well. The infrastructure, dual stacking, IPv4 and IPv6, virtualization, network assurance, which simply means the network management like SNMP, syslog, NetFlow, all these things. Security, where we are going to understand how exactly ACLs work, how AAA work, how control plane policing work, and of course automation as well. So automation is, that's where we're going to learn how exactly the programmability work, like Python language, EM, and what are the different tools that we use. For example, data structures like JSON or XML, and the programming language like the Yang data models, right? So, and which protocols do we use? Transportation protocol like netconf and resconf to send these API requests or application programming interface requests. So it's actually very interesting how exactly we open the doors between two different entities, like your client and one of the servers, and how can we send the request and get the response. It is pretty similar to SNMP, but easier than SNMP, because SNMP was mostly actually created for management instead of configuration or changing anything on the device. It can change many things, but SNMP coding is much more complex comparing to, for example, REST. Representational state transfer is very easy because it uses HTTPS the port number 443, which is open on most of the servers because it's a secure port first of all, and HTTPS is mostly used and allowed by many firewalls as well, right? So it becomes easier to send request, query something and get a response, or change something on the device using these protocols like netconf and resconf. Netconf is based on TCP, RESTconf TCP port number 820, but RESTconf uses well-known 443 port, which is HTTPS. So both options we will see pros and cons, and some examples of those as well. So what exactly are we cover in more detail into the infrastructure part? The first topic I mentioned into Encore. So this is mostly the switching part and the routing part, right? So switching, we are going to start from VLANs and trunking. So that is something you learn in CCNA as well, but we are going to refresh that and maybe learn a little bit more detail. How exactly VLANs work? What is the concept of trunking? Ether channel on the layer 2 and layer 3 level. Both types, static versus dynamic ether channel. So dynamic means if you're using a routing protocol for that, that is uh, that is that is the difference between static and dynamic. So we'll see that as well. STP we are going to cover in more detail because that's the core topic of switching part. Spanning tree protocol, rapid spanning tree protocol, multiple spanning tree. So we will have multiple labs also for VLAN trunking, ether channel, and STP. Routing protocols, this is something you learn in more detail in NRC, right? But here also you need to have enough knowledge so that you can cover any simulation if you get, or lab any lab if you get into the exam. So we are going to compare routing concepts of EIGRP, SPF, like what is the difference between the types, advanced distance vector, which is EIGRP, versus link state, which is OSPF, We are also going to cover load balancing, path selection, path operations, metrics, and different area types for OSPF. In OSPF, we are going to see OSPF version 2 and OSPF version 3, the new version of OSPF, which supports IPv6 as well and address families as well, multi-area, summarization, filtering, and different network types. So some advanced topics also will be covered in OSPF. And BGP, they are not going to into too much detail in Encor. It's only eBGP between directly connected neighbors. So best path selection algorithm and the neighbor relationship if you're using eBGP. Yeah, unlike NRC where we covered much more detail like eBGP versus IBGP and all configuration, right? And it also covers PBR, policy-based routing, which simply means you don't depend on the routing table to decide your next stop. Instead, even before going to the routing table, you decide the next stop based on the content or the header of the packet that is coming, like what is source IP, what is destination IP, source and destination port numbers, source and destination protocol, and any other things like QoS marking. So you can check many things of a packet and they can decide where it will be sent or maybe it will be dropped. You can decide anything instead of just checking the destination IP that you do in the traditional routing. So PBR also something we will also do the lab for this. In infrastructure, we are also going to understand wireless LAN infrastructure, how exactly wireless technology work, uh, what is the meaning of different things that we use in radio frequencies, different terms that we use, like SNR, signal to noise ratio. What exactly does it mean? And what is the signal floor? And what are the different coding technologies for wireless? What is 802.11, which is the wireless LAN standard? And what are the different speed and spectrum that we get in wireless? We are also going to understand network time protocol, network address translation, so IP services topics basically. Some redundancy protocols like HSRP and VRP, where you can have gateway redundancy. And we are also going to cover multicasting. Multicasting is when you use the one-to-many communication. You use a address which actually represent a group of devices, not a single device. So when you send something to this address, it ends up on multiple devices instead of going to a single device. So we are going to cover that as well. And design principles used in enterprise network, working principles of SD-WAN and SDA, as I mentioned earlier. So Cisco's software defined networking has two solutions. WAN side is called SD-WAN, and the LAN or the enterprise side or enterprise network or campus side solution is called SDA, software defined access. So what exactly SDN mean? How is it different from traditional routing? We are going to start from there, and then we'll see the specifics of SD-WAN versus SDA. QoS is another big topic, quality of service. So we'll make sure that we understand different queuing technologies, policing, shaping, congestion management, congestion avoidance. What exactly is the meaning of classification and marking? What kind of marking can you do on the layer 2 versus layer 3? Uh, and how many different types of architecture are there in QoS, like integrated services versus differentiated services? What difference is there between them? All these things we are going to cover in the QoS. And we'll also understand some basic differences between the tables used by routers and switches, like CEF table, CAM table, which is basically MAC address table, TCAM, uh, FIB, RIB, and adjacency table. So what are the meaning of these tables? What is the importance of these tables in routers and or switches? Virtualization, again, this part has some theory and some practical labs as well. Like we will understand what is a hypervisor, what is the difference between a type 1 and type 2 hypervisor, what is a virtual machine versus virtual switching, VRF, virtual routing and forwarding, GRE and IPsec tunneling. So GRE and IPsec both actually encapsulate one packet into another. But what's the difference between these two, and can we combine them as well? And Lisp and VXLAN. So these protocols are used on the control plane and data plane respectively when you use the Cisco SD SDA or software defined networking for campus or LAN side. So there, what is the use case of these two? Network assurance is basically network management and reporting. So debugging, conditional debugging, trace route, ping, SNMP, NetFlow, switch port analyzer technology, IPSLA, service level agreement, and the transportation protocol, netconf and resconf. Although netconf and resconf we will cover into the programmability part because they are used into basically automation and programmability. But of course, we are going to see some practicals of those as well. Security is a big topic in Encore, where we have understand the lines and local user authentication using AAA servers like authentication and authorization server. Although it's not a security exam, so you don't actually need to configure a AAA server like Radius server or TechX Plus server, but you need to know what you need to configure on the client side, means on the router or a switch to successfully forward the authentication and authorization request to one of the AAA server using Radius protocol or TechX Plus protocol. Radius is open standard, TechX Plus is Cisco proprietary. So we'll see the differences between these two as well. And it's a common question in exam. You'll see what is the difference between Radius and TechX Plus. They might give you a table and you have to mix and match the correct answers or select the properties of TechX Plus, Radius versus TechX Plus. So you'll understand the differences between those. We will also have a lab or multiple labs for ACLs and COP, so access control list and the control plane policing. We'll have some labs for these. REST APIs and its security. This is again we will cover in programmability part because REST or representational state transfer is one of the API mechanism to query or change something on a remote device using automation or using programmability. On the switching side, what are the different authentication method do we have? So we will understand .1x, web auth or pre-shared key, EAP or extensible authentication protocol over LAN, EAP OL, four-way handshake, and how does exactly a network security is designed from start to end? What is the complete life cycle? We are going to understand that also into the security part. Then comes the automation. So in automation, we are going to understand the basics of Python. So what are the components of Python language? What do we mean by different basic things like in Python, we have variables, we have something called longer variables like list or a dictionary. What do we exactly mean by these? What are the different concept of looping mechanisms like for loop and while loop? What is the conditional programming like if then else concept? How can we use all these things into a simple Python script versus a little bit more advanced script where you want to interact with the networking device? And generally what happens is that whenever you are sending some instruction to a device, you send it in a particular structure, and that structure is called the data structure or data format. So one of the data format which is very common and easier is called JSON. So XML or extensible markup language has been there for a long time, and web pages used to be created into HTTP or HTTP format where we use the XML format there, right? But XML is bulky and it takes more space to write down the same thing that you can write in a smaller context if you're using JSON, JavaScript object notation. So it's a simpler data structure comparing to XML. But what exactly are you sending to the devices? So devices can actually understand some structured queries. You cannot just ask anything to a device. You need to ask it in within the context of some kind of keywords, and those keywords are defined into a data model, which is called Yang data model. So we'll understand that as well, the language of automation and programmability. And whenever you're sending a query and getting a response, you are actually opening something called an API gateway. So application programming interface is nothing but enabling the interaction between two different entities like client-side application and a server-side application. For example, if I am implementing SD-WAN, I actually manage it from vManager. vManager is the management plane of SD-WAN. So you can log into the GUI of vManager and you can get all kind of information there, like how many devices you have, what kind of technology you're using, IPsec or GRE for encapsulation of the tunnels, what kind of authentication is being used, and all inventory questions you can check. You can check everything on the GUI. But what if you don't want to log into the vManager GUI and want to get all this information using the API request? By sending an API request, maybe to find out how many edge devices are there. You can do that using the REST APIs, and the SDN controller, the management controller we manage will respond back to you. Uh, and when it responses back, it actually responses with some API response codes. So what these codes mean, we are going to understand that, as I mentioned before as well, right? EM, I already talked about this, that you can configure a small scripting language in within the router and switches, Cisco routers and switches, which is called embedded event management, EEM, where the Cisco router or switch can actually perform some actions based on an event. So if an event happens, Cisco will, sorry, the router will automatically, router or switch will automatically perform some certain action, one or more action, and that is something you can do. Like maybe you have an interface which should always remain shut down. So if somebody tries to enable that interface by typing no shutdown command, router should see this as an event and immediately go into the interface and shut it down again. And then maybe generate a syslog message, also record who was the user who tried to do this, and also send an email to the administrator. So you can do many different things using simple EEM scripts as well, right? And we will understand the basics of orchestration tools, which can actually which are also called configuration management. Basically, it makes your configuration management easier if you use these tools. So Chef, Puppet, and Ansible, we are going to discuss these topics as well. So I already mentioned before, the tool that we use is called EVNG. We have used this in NRC as well, and we are going to use it on VMware. So you should already install VMware. You should already have it, and then you can import the OVA that I sent you, because topologies are already set in the EVNG. So the OVA that you import, that OVA will have all the pre-built topologies which we will use for different labs, and the labs will be file will be sent every week for the next week, and the solution file will also be sent along the lab file, right? So during the off days in a week, you are encouraged to do the labs again, and feel free to contact me also in case of any questions. Although in every live session also we will have a Q&A, of course, during the session using the chat, or after the session when I open the mic again, you can ask the questions there. Let's see if our Encor is booted now. You can see this is the OVA. You will receive an IP address, something like this, which you can open into one of your uh, browser of your choice, right? So let's open this. The password is admin and EU. And you see, for example, CCNP Encor switching topology. So for any switching questions, we are going to use this topology where we will have 4 switches connected to each other using 2 cables each. And also we have a router connected to switch 1 in case if you want to initiate some traffic, or we want to check some behavior of connection to the router, or acting as an end device basically. So we can use that. If you are doing any routing lab, we are going to use the Encor routing topology. So in the routing, we use multiple routers, connectivity between these routers. So we can use this to understand how exactly AIGRP works, OSPF works, and eBGP, or policy-based routing, any of the security topics or stuff we can also use the same topology. By the way, switching topology also we can use for our questions, or routing topology we can also use for our questions for gateway redundancy, HSRP, VRP. We can understand the logic here as well, right? Uh, for automation, you don't need many devices. What you need is slightly advanced routers. You see that I'm using a CSR router here. So CSR routers, they actually have inbuilt Python module as well. They also have a Linux container. You can spin it up as well, and you can use it if you want to check automation with the RESTconf and NetConf. If you want to send NetConf queries, NetConf API requests, RESTconf API requests to the router, we need to have a CSR router. So, or an advanced router which basically has to have an iOS XE operating system, which we have in CSR router. So you can see I have connected this to a cloud. Basically, this cloud is your network which you use to connect to the EVNG, like 192.168.79 or something. So I will get an IP address using DHCP from my host computer on this router, and my host PC will be able to communicate with this router so that I can send all kind of API requests to this router to either retrieve some information or to change some information. So we are going to do the programmability as well using this simple lab, because we need to concentrate on the topic instead of the number of devices, right? EVNG, a few things that topology are already set, OVA is already sent. Recommended RAM would be 8 to 16 gig, although it says 16 gig, but to be honest, 8 gig will also be fine. But of course, if you have 16 gig, that will be much more smooth. And after importing the OVA, make sure to adjust the RAM according to how much you have based on that. And also make sure that the first network adapter is set to NAT, or network address translation, right? So that's it from my side. Today we had a introduction to the Encor exam and the structure of the course. So from the next session onwards, we will start uh, directly jumping into the configuration, where basically we will start from the switching, then we'll go to the routing, and then the other advanced topics that we discussed today, right? So thanks, YK. Let me know if you have any questions.
Okay. So the calendar invites I got from you, the class is on Friday and Sunday, not Friday and Saturday, right?
Right, yeah. So we already had some class on Saturday, so we could not actually make it 2 days continuous. So that's why we made it like one class today, and then after 1 day gap, then the same time another class,
Okay.
another session basically.
Are you based in Bangkok?
Near to Bangkok, yes. I'm in Thailand, so little bit of the northeast side of the Bangkok.
Oh, okay. Now, how
Yeah.
come you guys don't offer the on-site classes anymore?
We used to do it before COVID, pre-COVID, but after that, we actually also had a plan to do it in Switzerland or in somewhere in Europe. But then, yeah, we do now want to start it again, but it's just that there is no there is no uh, proper structure created yet. We need to make sure that we have a proper place again and set up everything, because in the physical class, or if you are coming to the class in a classroom, a lot of infrastructure has to be created. Maybe we can use the OVS, but still you need devices, and you need to have a place which is easily accessible by everyone. So we do have a plan for this. Maybe this year sometime or next year we'll explore it. But yeah, for the time being, we don't have a physical class.
Okay. For let's say in the future, you guys do have come up with a physical class. How long
Yeah.
would the CCIE class last? Like a few
Uh,
months?
yeah, CCI basically is like couple of months, because
Okay.
we go like full day, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So we cover first of all a lot of more topics. Sorry, not more topics, but much faster, because you cover it for longer time, 8 hours in a day. And even if you're going with the theory for 4 hours, and then other 4 hours are for configuration, but still it is more than a session like we are doing. So it takes only like a couple of months to complete, not only complete all the topics of CCI, but also do multi-protocol labs a couple of times before winding up the class.
I mean, if you pass Encor, do you still need to cover the theory for CCIE class?
Yes, because CCI has many more things and much more detailed things. Like for example, every topic will go a little bit more detail. Not necessarily, but there are things that we don't cover in CCNP at all, that we will cover. Like as I mentioned, SD-WAN complete end-to-end practical we are going to do in CCI, which we don't do in Encore, or in CCNA. Of course, it's not even there. So see, there are topics which are either much more detailed or not there at all into on the CCNA and CCNP level. So that's why you do need a dedicated class. And then you have multi-protocol labs, which you don't have in Encore. or NRC, multi-protocol labs where we have a single topology. We cover most of the technologies there, starting from layer 2, then we build up layer 3, then we configure IP services, we configure QoS, multicasting, and we also configure SD-WAN, SDA, programmability, everything into a same big PDF lab where we have all the instructions. And that's what you get in exam also, like the similar structure. So you in the exam you get 6 hours, sorry, 5 hours to complete the multi-protocol lab, where you start from layer 2 and go all the way to the advanced topics.
I mean, do they actually ask questions in the lab exam, or you just get a lab and you just go through the labs?
Uh,
Exam.
they they ask question in the sense, like in NRC also you saw that we had the PDF lab every week, where I send you a PDF which has
Right.
instructions, do this, do that. You will get similar
Oh,
in the
okay.
exam. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So configure OSPF or configure EIGRP, or make sure that DMVPN tunnel is properly configured. There are some issues; it's not working, so you have to go check and fix it. So these kind of questions, which you will do on the lab on the topology, but what you need to do will be provided. The instructions will be provided there.
Oh, okay. But
It just
you
takes
think
5 hours because it's huge. There are many things they ask you in that, and that's why it takes 5 hours.
but you think going through your class for like a couple months for CCIE, do you think that's enough to pass the test?
No, to be
No.
honest, no.
Okay.
So if somebody wants, so there are two answers for this. First of all, is it enough content to pass the exam? Absolutely. We will make sure we cover everything that you need to pass the exam. But if anybody is telling you that, hey, join our course, 5 days boot camp, and you can pass the exam next day, that simply is not possible, because all the knowledge that you will get in the CCI class, it is extremely important and enough for the exam. You don't need to learn anything else or go anywhere else. But what you don't get is the speed, because in exam you need accuracy and speed. So accuracy you will get in our class. We will make sure that what we are teaching you is accurate and you understand it in the correct structure. But knowing how STP is configured doesn't mean you can configure it quick enough in the exam. So for that you need a lot of practice. So you need to do the multi-protocol labs and single protocol labs multiple times until you become very comfortable, not to cram anything or not to remember anything by heart, but just to get into that habit. Just like, an athlete has to practice a lot, excuse me, has to practice a lot, so that they can be very quick it's the day to perform, right? Same thing happens in CCI. So let's say after completing our class, you have to make sure that when you are doing the multi-protocol lab, you can comfortably complete it within 4 hours, so that in exam you get 5 hours, so you still have time to check for any typos, anything you misconfigured. You can go back and check everything. That's why I say that you need more time after that, and that depends student by student. Some students take more time to make sure they are comfortable with all technologies. Some are fairly quick, maybe they did it before as well, or maybe they are just quick learner. So that's why it cannot be like a single parameter or single criteria for everyone, right? But content wise, yes, our class will be more than sufficient to cover everything that you need to know for CCI.
Okay. All right, RP. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vaike, and
All right,
have a
then
good,
have a nice
have a good
weekend.
night.
I'll
And
see you on Sunday.
yes, I'll see you on
Okay,
Sunday. Bye bye.
okay, bye.